Help support the show by joining the Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. Also, hit that like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Every once in a while in the NFL, there are stories that you can kind of see coming, but you just never want to embrace because the outcome of the story is just so incredibly sad. And I'm speaking in the context of like what's incredibly sad for a football fan. Obviously not like in life, right? These guys are fine. They made millions of dollars, but it's incredibly sad for a football fan. And one of these stories is what seems to be going on, unfortunately, with Nick Chubb. This story at this point is not just about whether the Browns should bring him back anymore. Nick Chubb seems to be struggling to stay in the NFL at this point. And the reason it's sad is this isn't because Nick Chubb has done something wrong or Nick Chubb has legal problems or Nick Chubb has off the field issues. The idea of Nick Chubb having off the field issues is like hilarious to me. I mean, it would shock me if it were ever something that came up with him, right? Like he's just such a model citizen as far as like an NFL athlete is considered, you know? And for years, Nick Chubb was the engine, the people's champ of the Cleveland Browns fan base. He was the one thing that got you excited about watching the Cleveland Browns, right? Especially in the early period, right? Because in 2018, Nick Chubb was the first pick to really show his potential. Baker Mayfield showed it later in that season. Myles Garrett missed most of his rookie year with injury, came back. It wasn't until like 2019, 2020 we start to realize the full potential Myles Garrett was going to live up to. But Nick Chubb, for a lot of people, has been that dependable thing that you can lean on. And he is now at the tail end of his career, which has come faster than anybody anticipated. Well, not anybody, than people may have wanted to have happened, right? I don't think in 2022 we were thinking to ourselves, hey, 3 years from now, Nick Chubb's going to have a hard time signing with the NFL team. But that's the reality that we're in. He's at the same crossroads that like Kareem Hunt was last year, where Kareem Hunt was like this close to being out the league. But fortunately for Kareem, and this is what's kept Kareem in the league the last like 3 years, a team that he has a lot of history with had a need at running back. In 2023, that was the Cleveland Browns. Had an unexpected need at the end of training camp at running back, brought back Kareem Hunt. 2024, last season, it was the Kansas City Chiefs. Had an unexpected need at running back, brought somebody they had familiarity with. So that's how Kareem stayed in the league. Nick Chubb is going to be a little different because, yes, he has a much brighter reputation on the field than Kareem Hunt. The problem is nobody else is really familiar with him. And you also have to ask yourself the question, is Nick Chubb, despite what we saw early in his career where he was splitting carries very heavily, is he somebody you can have when you can't build the whole run game around him? If he's not going to be Nick Chubb anymore. I don't know what people are seeing when they bring Nick Chubb in on these visits. I don't know what Nick Chubb's agent is sending people, but it seems to have not inspired a ton of confidence, right? I thought this would be a clear bounce back situation, much like Derrick Henry and the Baltimore Ravens, much like what happened with Saquon Barkley and the Philadelphia Eagles, where there'll be a bunch of teams willing to give Nick Chubb a shot if the Browns didn't want to do it. You know, considering that the money for Nick Chubb would have been significantly less than it would have been for Derrick Henry or Saquon Barkley. And, you know, Nick Chubb would either come back to Cleveland or get to finish his career in a dignified way. And I think what we're facing here is a very undignified end to a player's career who, look, we could argue about who deserves what or if you deserve anything in the NFL, right? But if anybody deserved a dignified ending to their career in any city, it's Nick Chubb in Cleveland. This is why I've made the argument. I don't know what Nick Chubb physically looks like. It must not be great. I've seen a couple videos floating around of Nick Chubb trying to cut left and right and run, and I haven't been overly impressed with what I've seen, but that's a small chunk of what he's actually doing, right? Like, I can't really judge too much off of that. So I don't know what these teams are judging or basing their lack of interest in Nick Chubb on. I think that Nick Chubb still got a year or two left. That's just my personal belief, that Nick Chubb has a year or two left. That on top of the fact that I think Nick Chubb deserves a dignified end. And let's face it, he's not going to be expensive. And this is a season where if you want to dedicate it to giving Nick Chubb a dignified end, is it really going to be the worst thing in the world? Now, I would get it if the Browns were like coming off a second round exit and they really needed to improve at the running back position and Nick Chubb was going to cost you $12 million and you just really need to spend that $12 million somewhere else. If the Browns were in that situation, it would be tough, but I would understand why you would move on. But that's not the spot the Browns are in. The Browns don't have to do anything with the running back room. They don't have to really commit any money anywhere else. They're not that cap strapped. And I know some people will believe that whenever it's convenient, but the truth is that the Browns are not cap strapped. They're never cap strapped. They spend a ton of cash. If Jimmy Haslam says he's okay with Nick Chubb coming back, which I see no reason why he would be against that, then the Browns could easily bring back Nick Chubb and it wouldn't really affect your plans for this season, given that you don't have grandiose plans for this season. So I really don't see an excuse for the Browns to let this happen. And this is one of those situations where I'm like, man, I get from a very cold, separated from how people feel standpoint of not doing it because you don't think Nick Chubb can play anymore. And if you don't think he can play, you'd rather give those reps to Jerome Ford or Dylan Sampson. I understand that thought process. I get it's very scientific, and it might be technically correct, but there is something to just doing right by people. And if you're the Cleveland Browns and Nick Chubb remains a free agent like deep into training camp, I think the right thing to do at that point would be to give this guy a dignified end, right? Give him a dignified ending to his career. And like, I don't even know if at this point retirement would be a dignified end because Nick Chubb really did not look like himself, and I don't think he wants to go out the way that he went out. I think he wants to play one more season just to know, right? And that doesn't mean you got to give Nick Chubb 200 carries, right? Give Nick Chubb a role and just let him do that on the way out and kind of just get this man a dignified ending. Right now, if you're the Browns, you need some PR wins. And I know nobody wants to hear PR wins when we're talking about football, but you need some PR wins, right? You've had a couple in the draft. I think taking Shador in some ways was a PR win, right? But the Browns, for their core fan base, which the Sanders stuff may or may not have appeased it, the Nick Chubb stuff, I think matters a lot. And it's just, and again, I get it. This is more of an emotional take for me. I usually come from a different side of things, but I don't want to be ignorant to how these things make you feel because, again, sports are about the result, but they're also about how those results make you feel. I think people forget that. There are ways your team can be very successful and they do nothing for you emotionally. And if your team is very successful, but emotionally you're not happy with your team's success, then it doesn't matter, right? It's like if a tree gets chopped in the woods, nobody hears it, doesn't matter. This is where football becomes less of a science, more of an art, even rooting for football, right? But I think giving Nick Chubb a dignified end, like he's the one guy in this era whose career's about to end, right? All the guys that were drafted 2017, 2018, David Njoku's career is going to last longer. Myles Garrett has a lot of years left in his career. Baker Mayfield's out there in Tampa Bay. His legacy's no longer tied to Cleveland. All of those guys, Nick Chubb's the one whose career's ending. And I'm not saying we got to give him a farewell tour, but at least allow a player in a situation like that to have a dignified ending. A lot of teams do it. A lot of really good championship caliber teams do it. We just saw the Eagles do this with Brandon Graham. So don't tell me this, we're competing for championships. We got no room for that. That's bullshit. This stuff helps you build culture. This stuff helps you build internal buy-in to the locker room culture and the brand. This stuff helps, right? The good teams do it. The great teams do it. Travis Kelce was not going to be in the league anymore. I bet the Chiefs would sign him for one more year and just let him go out tough. Right? You think they're going to let Travis Kelce end his career on the Jaguars or something like that, going out sad? That's not how they want that to go. You take care of your legends. And Nick Chubb is a legend. And, we'll see. Maybe he gets a chance to play somewhere else, and that's what's better for everybody. My thing is, if we get past August, and it is clear Nick Chubb's not going to be on the team, and it is clear that the league is going to leave him behind, and you have a roster spot to spare, I think using one of those roster spots on Nick Chubb wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. People can call it what they want, but at the end of the day, this is what you do for your legends. You don't let them go out in such an undignified manner, especially somebody who has done nothing but be loyal to the Cleveland Browns, do what people have asked of him, and make sacrifices. I think if the Browns want to instill any loyalty in their locker room, show some loyalty to somebody who has sacrificed it all for you, right? I think that's what a lot of fans are asking for. And I get that people are going to initially hear that and go, oh, that's not what teams do, and we got to make football-based decisions. And I'm just telling you right now, you're wrong. That's not how it always goes. Like this stuff, you do this kind of thing. Think about it like this. If you were running a business and you saw somebody in Nick Chubb's situation who had helped you build your business, you would probably offer that person an opportunity at the business they helped you build to have a dignified ending to their career, if you could do it. I know I would. Like, if I were in that position, I know I would try to do somebody a solid, even if it meant I had to sacrifice a little bit. That's just basic human decency. Nick Chubb's career might be over based on time that he put in for a Cleveland Browns team that, quite frankly, just wasn't as successful as we had all hoped. A Cleveland Browns team that wasted a lot of time jumping around with coaches, jumping around with different GMs. Once you found a coach and GM you like, we bounced around with quarterbacks. We did a lot of finagling and fucking around with Nick Chubb's career. I wouldn't say it's crazy to say you owe it to him, that if you see him about to have a very undignified ending to his career, like about to be on somebody's practice squad, you should save him from that. You should do him the solid. Let him come back. Make sure he wears 24. At the last game of the season, give him all the carries he wants if we're not about to make the playoffs. And just let the brother go out with his head up. Or let him prove that he can stay in the league, right? I'm not saying his career has to end in Cleveland, but if it is looking like an undignified end and a really kind of just sad end for a player who did as much as Nick Chubb and nobody wants to give him a shot, you got to be the team that gives him that. You got to do that solid. And, this is a video that I'm going to do later on. We got to ask ourselves some real questions about hey, we're going to run the ball a ton, but are we sure we got the run game to do this? Are we going to really trust it? That's another thing, right? I think having some veteran leadership in there would be great. If you're planning on running the ball at the highest rate in the NFL with a non-mobile quarterback, you might need 4 running backs anyways. So you might not even lose carries. I just don't see why they can't bring him back, right? Andrew Berry can make it happen if he wanted it to. Kevin Stefanski can make it happen if he wanted it to, right? If it doesn't happen and Nick Chubb just has his career fiddle out like a nobody when he doesn't deserve it, that's on Kevin, that's on Andrew. It just shouldn't happen. And I hope Nick Chubb signs somewhere and gets to have a dignified ending to his career. But, man, I really just don't want to see his career just fizzle out because he got hit low in one game versus Pittsburgh and he never gets to feel like Nick Chubb again. He deserves it. If anybody does, based on what we know about him and what he's done in his football career and what he's done for the Cleveland Browns, that guy deserves it.